All right. My name is Becca, and I am an author success coach. And what that means is I've coached almost 6,000 individual authors of all different income levels and all different genres. And part of what I do, and I study this academically, not just for fun, I'm also an author, but part of what I do is I do research looking for the patterns of what makes authors do what they do when it comes to creativity. And the program that we're starting to develop, which is not at all developed yet, this is just, you are literally getting some of the first information out of the research that exists, because I think this continuum in particular is one of the most helpful things for authors who are looking into decision making for their platforms. The reason that I present it in continuum form is because it's a very complicated system, and I want to make it as insular as possible, or as small as possible. So, continuums of archetypes is what we are going to be talking about. We're going to do one continuum. It's the right to market continuum, so if this interests you, you're in the right place. Who here has heard of min-maxing? Everybody know what this is? If you're a gamer, you know min-maxing because you do it intentionally, right? So you min-max a character depending on what the situation is that the character's in, and you're looking to maximize the qualities that will benefit the character in that situation and minimize the qualities that will not benefit the character in that situation, right? So you're essentially doing character creation. So in game theory, this is a very intentional process. And I think a lot of us believe that we can min-max our author career in a similar way. We want to be able to just not do those things that we don't like about ourselves. And we want to be able to just do those things that other people do that make them successful, right? Isn't that why we're all in this room right now, right? Bad news. Okay, bad news. Some things are not changeable. There are some things about ourselves, our environments, our personalities, our careers, our platforms that are not changeable. And then there are some things that are. So when we talk about author success archetypes, these are things that we have found to be not changeable. There's some variance in terms of how hardcore they are. Some of them are very much like, you are this, there's no changing it. Some of them are, there's a little more variance. This happens to be one of the continuums, the right to market, where there is almost no variance. You almost can't min-max your way out of this continuum. So when I say that that's bad news, I say that because a lot of us go to workshops and conferences hoping to learn the secret trick or the silver bullet. Any silver bullet seekers? Yep. Or the silver bullet that's going to magically make you not need to go through research rabbit holes anymore, or not make you have to think about your book anymore, or not make you move the goalposts when you have success, right? Like, we're looking for those opportunities, and so many of those things are things we can't change about ourselves. So if you imagine a complicated system of switches inside of your head, essentially what happens is there are certain things that you can min-max, and then certain things that have been set for you. And the buttons are all about the different types of capacity that you could have in this particular archetype. And then the sliders are, the buttons and the sliders are very similar. So if you saw my button sliders yesterday in the burnout, you'll be familiar with this. But we'll talk more about this in a second. There is significant evidence in the field of psychology that there are certain personality traits that we have that are cemented and unchangeable. And a lot of people who are fans of growth mindset think that when I'm talking about you can't min-max something, that what I'm saying is you can't change anything about yourself. 0% am I saying that. What I'm saying is anything can be changed, but should you change it? Because there are certain things that are so hardwired in you that trying to change it will take so much time and attention. And when I say time and attention, I mean years sometimes of work trying to change this thing about you, where I could either spend all that time and put everything else on hold until I can develop this brand new set of systems and skills, or I could accept the way I am in most situations and decide only to change the things that are the most important to change. Archetypes are not important to change. When I go through the 4 archetypes on this continuum, some of you are going to be like, oh, but those people can't have success. Yes, they can. So the important part about the success archetypes is that they're based on research of authors who are already making money. So when I say these are the 4 success archetypes, what I don't mean is there's one type that makes all the money and the other 3 don't make any money. What I mean is this is how people make money in the industry, period. And there are these 4 different types of money making in the industry, specifically using right to market or how you create products for the market. So in order to talk about one of the buttons and sliders, I want to use a set of archetypes that's already familiar to us. Everybody knows what these are, right? If you don't, this might not be the right talk for you. But so I'm assuming that you all know what plotters and pantsers are. The question that I ask, because of the way that my brain is wired and the research that I'm doing to try to help authors find success, is why are plotters plotters? So if we assume that that's a thing you can't change about yourself, why is that happening? And why are pantsers pantsers? Here's what I have found in the research. There's a combination of switches and sliders that happens in your brain that fires in a way that makes you be a plotter or a pantser or somewhere in between. And if you look at this, so the top, comfort with unpredictability, thinking ahead, notice how that's on, right? Automatically knowing the story is off. Knowing how to outline is a volume, so you can change that. You could learn how to outline more, right? Will to keep writing, so I want to continue to write. And then in the bottom right, if you can't see, it says bored with plans. Let one guess which one that is. Bored with plans, and then I will write what I plan. So notice that the assumption is that not all of us fit in the same place on every one of these buttons and sliders. Some of them are on and are never going off. So which one? But let's think for a second. Some switches can't be turned off. The ones in red, generally speaking, are so hardwired that you trying to turn them off is not going to be helpful for you. So generally speaking, and there are exceptions, and I will not cover them in this talk, but there are exceptions. If I ever do a talk on plotters and pantsers, I'll talk about it. But there are some things we can't change, or that take too much to change. And then there are some things that we can. I can learn how to outline better, but all the understanding of outlining in the world is not going to make me not get bored with what I have planned to write. Not possible. That's not solving the problem that you're having. So me just learning more about how to outline is not going to turn me into a plotter. Will to keep writing, you can change that. My will to keep writing can go down or up, right? So it's important to know that some of them can be changed and some of them can't. Any guesses, by the way, which one, which one this is? So low comfort with unpredictability, thinking ahead is on, write what I plan is high, board with plans. Right, yeah, so we all know how to read the graphs now, so that's great. All right. If I'm a pantser, the question is not, can I outline? It's, should I? Is it worth my time? Because as an archetypal pantser or an archetypal plotter, and yes, there are more archetypes on that particular continuum, I just use the 2 on the very extremes, but can I change and should I change are different questions. If you can't change it, then don't. Just accept it. So plotters and pantsers are archetypes of writers, and what we found, and this is what we're going to talk about for the majority of the time today, is that it is less about storytelling archetypes. So who's familiar with like the doppelganger and the 2 idiot friends or whatever it's called from like archetypes of storytelling, where it's like there's 13 different archetypes. And by the way, if you've never seen this before, put Star Wars and Harry Potter next to each other with their archetype designations. It is unbelievable how exact copies they are. It's incredible. Anyway, this is not, there's 16 archetypes, and then each one of us in this room is one archetype, and it's going to solve every problem we've ever. Silver bullet thinking, you guys. Stop using silver bullet thinking. It is ruining your life. So what we found is that it's less that there's 16 master archetypes and every single person is one archetype. What we found is there is a continuum for that, and every single archetype of writer, when it comes to that particular part of the research, everyone falls into a continuum of that archetype. And if you want to be successful, you need to be more of that and get better at that, rather than trying to shift into a different archetype. And this will make more sense when I tell you what they are, because when we talk about right to market, almost 100% of the right to market advice you will ever get is made for one type. One. Almost 100%. So those of you who have failed at writing to market, don't raise your hands because I do not want to see those numbers. But those of you who have failed at it and you have come wondering, why can I not make this work for myself? I can tell you why. It's because you're using advice that's made for the wrong archetype. So today we're going to cover what I think, especially at a conference of very driven, very excited to have success authors, where we talk a lot about how to make books fit into the market, and then we struggle when we are not made for it in the way that it's being taught. So it's really important to know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And it's not a train, by the way. Okay. So we're going to talk about min-maxing the right to market archetypes. And the 4 archetypes are the Trailblazer, the Drafter, the Evergreen, and the Island. And if anybody doesn't have access to these slides currently from the form, like from eVenti, you can get them at betterfasteracademy.com/20books if you want to follow along with us, because I know that people online may not be able to see this. So yes, betterfasteracademy.com/20books. It should be right at the top link. Okay, Trailblazer, Drafter, Evergreen, and Island, because you're going to need to see these pictures when we get into this. Trailblazers must be new and different, and usually first. Trailblazers are the people when you have an idea, and it is the greatest idea. If any of you listened to Jamie's podcast where I talked about the eunuch werewolves, right? Yes. Wish I'd known then for writers. Yeah. That is a trailblazer in action. And by the way, don't write that. No one wants it. I've tried. It turns out that when you do certain things as a trailblazer, you accidentally break the rules of what people like about the genre, because you always have to be new and different and almost always first. So not only would it bother you, so if anybody had the idea for eunuch werewolves before I just talked about it, you're mad at me for talking about it. Because now, don't write it, by the way, it's really awful. It will not sell, I promise you. I mean, maybe it will, who knows. That was the Trailblazer in me saying that. But the reason I said, right? The reason I said, and usually first, is because trailblazers see the open holes, the things that haven't been done before, and not in the same way as drafters. So let me show you the min-max of the trailblazer. So trailblazers desire to copy someone else, 0. If someone else does it, you will not be able to make yourself do it. In fact, a lot of the right to market advice will feel so frustrating to you, because here's what you'll do. You'll say, yeah, I'm going to write paranormal romance because it's selling. But I'm going to write eunuch werewolves because no one's done that before, for good reason. Anyway. Yeah, that was awful. But because the desire to be like someone else is so strong, I sat down to write to market, assuming that I was actually writing to market. Because I was writing PNR, and I was writing shifters, and I was writing romance, right? So I was checking all of the boxes of what I was supposed to do. There was an alpha, I think, there was a romance, et cetera, right? I thought that I was checking all the boxes. But inside that book, every sentence was written by a person whose need to be different is so high that I couldn't make myself write what someone else had written. So as soon as I would be like, oh, that sounds so tropey, then I would change what I was writing. Because I'm like, oh, that's boring. We've heard it all before, right? Which those of you who write tropey stuff, you know, right, that's why it sells. Because they've heard it. But my risk level and need, if I'm a trailblazer, is so high. It is on, I want to be risky, because when you're first in and you are risky, then people remember who you are. Sometimes, I will say, not always. My desire to continue when no one follows. So think of the blazing of a trail, and I'm off now. So here's PNR, and I'm going this way. And when I look back and no one's following me, I am so angry as a trailblazer. And those of you who are trailblazers right now who are listening, I'm pointing at the camera because I know there are some of you at home. You are mad at me now because it has explained something about you that nothing else has ever been able to explain to you, right? Because you think it's so weird that nobody else cares about that. Like if other people are copying you, why does that not bother you? If you were not first, why does that not bother you? And yet the understanding of how other people can do that writing to market in the way that it's being taught, you don't understand that. You always want to be different. So the other thing that's super important on the right side is the comfort with unpredictability is super high. In fact, it's almost a desire for unpredictability. And then the tolerance for it's been done is very low. Out-of-box thinking is generally high, and invention need is very high. So this is the type of person who wants to come into a genre and change everything. So all of the advice that's given in Right to Market is don't do any of this stuff though, because it's dangerous, right? But here's the key. There are so many people who are wired like this who make money. It's just that they don't make money every single time they release a series. They are not guaranteed to make money because people do have to follow them. But what they can't do is force themselves to write to market the way that the drafters do. Because not only will they not have success with it, but they will be so angry when it sells. You think that I'm joking, but it is righteous anger, man, I tell you. Okay, so the story we tell ourselves if we're a trailblazer is that we're complicated and unfocused. Other people call us divas. Why can't you just do what everybody else does? Why do you have to be so complicated, etc.? And then, of course, the lie is you'll never have success if you do this. So if you are a trailblazer, you are listening to this, you need to know that success is possible with every single archetype. It is not predictable, but it is not predictable with any archetype. Success is not predictable. So when you think about, I can't change that, I can't do this differently, everybody keeps telling me I have to write what everyone else writes. No, you don't. But you do have to expect the life of a trailblazer, which is sometimes frustrating, which is sometimes no one's following me, you get 2 books into a series, no one's behind you, and you can't ever write in that series again because no one followed you. So just knowing that is at least 50% of the battle with how to make your decisions in this world, in this industry. So the truth is that there are some really huge strengths about being a trailblazer. And if were any of you reading books in like 1970, right? So if you look back at the past BISAC from 1970, the number of genres is like 3% or something of what it is today. The reason that we have so many multiplied niche genres is because of these people. Because every time it starts to feel too predictable, trailblazers get itchy and they have got to write some muted werewolves. But they like to break things. They're risk takers. And this makes some of us who are in some of the other archetypes really uncomfortable because they're like, stop doing that, Trailblazers. It's so dangerous. But they're made for it. They're built for it, right? They want to take the risks. Trying to play it safe for Trailblazers will not be the answer. Because again, if you have success playing it safe, you won't like it. And then they're highly creative. And creative in a different way than we're all creative as writers. Creative, like, I need to make this different, right? Success looks like accepting the failures when they happen. This is just the cost of being a trailblazer. It does not mean I can't have success in the future. In fact, if any of you have read biographies of really big trailblazers in like rock music or art or anything, and you see failure, 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 I thought I would, frustration, awful stuff, and then all of a sudden take off, wild success, yay, but also you didn't know that was coming, you just kept moving. So as trailblazers, it is so important to do the Disney thing, right? Like just keep moving forward. You've seen Meet the Robinsons, you know that. Embracing angst about following others' trends because it will bother you, and it will also bother you when other people follow your trends. Finding support from people who understand the adoption curve. If you've ever heard of the idea diffusion curve, most, but not all, most trailblazers fall somewhere in the first 15% of that, where they're either early adopters or innovators. And so you need support from people who understand risk takers and innovators. All right, the drafter. What is working, especially the trailblazers? Trailblazers watch drafters watch trailblazers like nobody's business. They are always looking for, so where trailblazers are looking for what's never been done before, drafters are looking for what's next. What's the big cool thing that's coming? What is that trailblazer done that everybody's going to be excited about now, right? Drafters watch the market constantly. In fact, if you have a friend who is always talking to you about the market, there's a really good chance that they're a drafter. Because if you know anything about racing, right, drafters come in behind and then they overtake. So the goal of the drafter is I want to find the exact right path that some really good trailblazer has blazed already, even though they will not admit that because they like thinking they're first. That's so cute. In fact, a lot of you drafters are like, oh, I must be a trailblazer because I like being first, but I'm like, but you're never first though. Not the bad way though, right? Because the big money is sometimes in being second. Because sometimes the person who blazed the trail is too early and the rest of us haven't caught up yet with how cool that is. Anybody who was on TikTok before the pandemic, so being on TikTok before the pandemic, right? Everybody was like, this is the stupidest thing that I've ever seen. No one's ever made a video. Like, it was hilarious to watch people. And then all of a sudden, all the drafters came in and were like, oh, we're going to dominate this. We can make this super cool, right? And then we got a growth arc of TikTok because the drafters figured out how to make it cool. And that is almost always what drafters do. They make the big splashes. They, unfortunately, trailblazers, close your ears for a second. They sometimes do it better than the trailblazers do because they want so badly to meet the market need. So where trailblazers are trying to go off the side, drafters want to stay as close to that middle as they can because they know the middle is where the money is, but the new cutting edge is where all of the dominance is. So it's really, really hard to dominate something that's already been dominated by someone unless you do something a little different from them. So if you look at the sliders for the drafter, tolerance for been done is still fairly low. They still do not like things that everyone has done. In fact, a lot of drafters will first identify as trailblazers until we start to talk about when the last time was that they did something nobody else had done before. Right? Because usually drafters are like, no, I want to do this better than they did it, and I want to be that. Or they'll realize that that's what they've done, right? Watching the market is on all the time, desire to be first is off, but they don't want to admit that it's off. Because they want the money, and this is not a bad thing, it's just how drafters are. They want the money more than they want to be first. So they're watching for that growth edge, but again, a lot of it is, I think I want to be first, but it is actually off. So the ability to adapt tactics, this is what's huge. None of the other archetypes have as high of an ability to adapt other people's successful tactics as drafters do. So those of you who are not in these first two archetypes, and we'll get to you in a second, and you are struggling to write to market because you can't make yourself see what it is inside of the book that everybody likes. So you read the book that everyone's talking about and you're like, how is this different than anything? I don't understand. Like, a lot of people really struggle when they are not drafters to be able to figure out how to adapt the tactics correctly. The good news is, almost everybody who's teaching authors, almost everyone, is on some level a drafter. Not everybody, but they are really good at teaching you specific tactics about how to do that. So if what you're looking for is just learning tactics, the drafters are who you want to watch. So the need for self-pleasure in drafters is low, and the reason this is important is that a lot of drafters are willing to sacrifice how good they feel or how much they like what they write in order to be more dominant. And by that I don't mean that every drafter will write stuff they hate, but what I do mean is they're really good at only picking the things that are selling. And that is super different because none of the other two archetypes on this that are coming can do that. The need for self-pleasure is significantly higher in those last two archetypes. Innovation is still fairly high, and the desire for new is still fairly high. The primary difference between drafters and trailblazers is that tactic adaptation. If you're a trailblazer, you struggle to adapt, especially in text tactics of other authors, and you will really struggle to figure out what makes a book sell. So if you are that person, we'll get to you in a second. All right, drafters. So the story that drafters tell themselves, and usually this doesn't actually bother most drafters because they're so focused on being more successful, right? So the story that they tell themselves is often that they're just trend chasers, that they're never first, they're not exciting enough, and that they're trying to be more and more exciting all the time. But the thing drafters do for us that is unbelievable, it's so cool when it happens, is they can see, if any of you know Sarah Cannon, you know Sarah Cannon? Yeah. So she can tell you what is going to be the next big thing with uncanny accuracy. She's one of the best examples of drafters I've ever seen before. But she can just tell you because she's watching everything. She watches all the markets, she watches consumer behavior, she watches everything. And she's so interested by it. But then that means that she's subconsciously reading tactics and trends all the time. And she's always in that drafter mode, right? So that obsession with, I want to see how I can make this better, or we can do this better and more exciting, right? That's a drafter thing. So even though you may not blaze completely new ground, all drafters on some level do something different from the trailblazers, which is why I said their desire for doing different is higher. Okay, so what is the truth about drafters? They're able to quickly spot trends. They can make things work that trailblazers can't. So there's probably a drafter in the world who could make Unit Werewolves work. It is not me, but it could be someone. Which is why I said, if you really want to write it. But they are very agile and able to pivot because, again, they're always watching the market and wanting to go where the market is. And then generally speaking, the drafters are the ones we listen to when we are getting advice from people. This is why it's so important to have this conversation about author success archetypes, because if you are not meshing with drafter advice, you have to know that you need to separate and find other advice that works for you. Drafters roughly are 10% of authors. It is not a high number. So a lot of you would love to be drafters, because we'll get to you in just a second. But you know that this level of obsession and capacity to adapt tactic is not you. But generally speaking, the drafters are the ones that we're always like, oh, what are you doing? It looks so great. So success for a drafter looks like generally they'll be able to figure this out on their own because they're so single-minded, right? I may never be the very first person. Congratulations, you don't have to be. There's lots of money in doing what other people have done and doing it better than they did it. Embracing the nature of noticing someone else's brilliance, being on the lookout for when someone's doing something really great and they're just not quite there yet. And then getting support when necessary means a lot of drafters have a tendency to burn out, because when they do find success, they're in that part of the burnout trend that we talked about yesterday, where when you have massive success and there's too much expectation on you, you burn out. That tends to happen to drafters. So get support, all you drafters out there. And then curating who gets to give you advice. Please stop listening to the Trailblazers. Like, as much as you look up to them and they're like weird free thinking, don't let them tell you how to change what you do. Drafters gotta draft, right? Trailblazers gotta trailblaze, so similarly, same. Okay, most of the people who are listening to this are gonna fall into this next category. The drafters, the evergreens are so interested in what the drafters are doing. They are watching drafters constantly. They are constantly trying to figure out how to do exactly what the drafters have done. And the reason is because evergreens are really good at noticing when something is organically exciting or organically interesting to people. So different from the drafters who notice the holes in the market, evergreens notice the way people respond, right? So if you think of an evergreen tree that has a trunk, a lot of evergreens try to be drafters, and they essentially cut themselves off and try to plant themselves in a field and then wonder why they're not growing. They are trying so hard to adapt the tactics of the drafters when they write to market, because this is what's hot, this is what's selling, this is what we're supposed to write. And so many evergreens struggle with wanting to do it but not being able to. So the evergreen is interested in that organic feeling of growth or excitement about what happens when people love story, or when they love a genre, or they love an author. So you get really excited about that, but then you forget that the reason you notice that is because you are an organic writer. So almost all evergreens, and again, it's a very large percentage, more than 50% of authors are evergreens. So almost all evergreens will think that they are drafters the first time they hear about this. They're like, oh, I watch the market. I'm like, but do you though? Sarah Cannon, she's one of my favorite people. She watches everything. She looks at ads for fun. Like one of my best friends, Crystal, is a drafter. She will sit and watch TV and not watch TV. She's looking at Facebook ads. She's like, oh, what's selling? What does that look like? I see some of you who are drafters who are nodding. You're like, yeah, that sounds like fun. And all the evergreens are like, but what did you find out? Because evergreens are really interested in what makes that large group of people follow that trend or follow the market, but they struggle with being able to make the tactics work for themselves. So the struggle with the evergreen is that I feel like I want to write to market. I feel like I want to write to trend specifically. I want to write to trend. Oh, is that what's hot? Oh, is that what's hot? Oh, maybe I should do that. Oh, let's do this. So many evergreens are like that, and they end up getting pushed around by the drafters and never having success because they are constantly trying to write what the drafters are writing instead of think about how a tree moves. So evergreen trees grow in a direction, and the way that they change is not by cutting themselves down. It's by moving with the wind, right? So the evergreen trees are, the way that Pippa Grant described it, which I loved, was, what is the thing that I absolutely love to do? And then is there something in that that is already marketable? And can I maximize that thing that is already marketable? So instead of trying to completely change what I do, completely change what I love, I want to look more at what do I love, what lights me up, what excites me, and then look for the market that is already serving that, and then write what I want, write what I love. The downside is, and this is true of every archetype, this is not just true for evergreens, success is not promised for any of these. You can be a drafter and not make money. You can be a trailblazer and not make money. You can be an evergreen and not make money. But the point is, you're never going to be an evergreen making money as a drafter, ever. So if you are more in that organic sense of like, I am not the person who can adapt tactics easily, I cannot watch the market easily, I need to know how to maximize that organic sense of myself and what I love, and to write what I love inside of my books. And we'll talk in a second about the last archetype, which is much better than that. I wish more evergreens would watch islands rather than watching drafters. But we're so worried that there's only one way to have success that we've lost the sense that you can have success. So just, I'm fairly certain she'll be okay if I talk about this because she talks about this publicly. Pippa Grant is an evergreen. And she was originally writing different, under a different name. And when she started writing as Pippa Grant, she did this thing, right? The evergreen thing where here's what I love, and this is what is marketable. And I'm going to write right in the center of that thing and let the wind of the market move me in what I already love. So she maximizes tropes. She looks at what's selling in her genre, things like that, right? As opposed to, let me go write this other thing that the drafters are writing. And her success has been hugely wild because she embraced the nature of that evergreen archetype. So when you look at how evergreens have success, they don't have success by writing to trend. They have success by finding the market that already exists and filling the need that's there so wholly and completely as themselves that it feels more organic to them. So the story that we tell ourselves about being evergreens is, so I have to point this out really quickly. Generally speaking, that top slider of ability to innovate with evergreens is not always in the same place. There are lots of evergreens who like new and different things. There are lots of evergreens who like to be creative, and even who may want to be first, but they know instinctively that they're not trailblazers. So if that's you, you can talk to me afterwards, we'll clarify that. But the natural capacity to please an audience, this is so important. Part of the reason that Pippa had the success that she had was because she loves her books. She loves what she writes. She is her own audience. And so many evergreens skipped over that part in Chris Fox's book and went straight to the trend chasing and skipped over the part where he literally said, write what you love, please, but we skip that part. Because we think, oh, there's no money in what I love. I'm like, no, there is though. There's money everywhere. By the way, can we stop saying there's no money in? There's literally money everywhere. Literally. Okay. Except Unit Werewolf. Zero money. Well, actually, we did make a little money, but it wasn't real. Just to clarify. There's little money. So always late to the party, evergreens, but that's okay. The party has now begun and you can just show up and have fun. You do not have to be the first person at the party. One of the things that's common with evergreens is the feeling that we work too hard to be able to adapt. So I work so hard in a direction, I'm working really hard on a series, I can't possibly change. So if you have that feeling, that's a very common evergreen feeling of, well, I can't disappoint my readers, right? Like that's a super common evergreen feeling. But generally speaking, evergreens have a hard time pivoting quickly. So when you hear this particular discussion, it's going to be hard for you to think about abandoning the trend chasing that you've been doing, because you don't want to abandon those readers. And I'm telling you, abandon ship. Do what lights you up. I should write to market. We all know what shoulds are. Okay. Generally speaking, evergreens will finish what they started. They're able to commit and stay the course, and they want to tell the story that either pleases themselves or the fans. And this is the beauty and the gold of evergreens, is almost always you are your own audience. So write for yourself. Okay. Success for evergreens. We've talked about a lot of this already. I just want to highlight that there is still a lot of money in the deliberate nature of not having to be a drafter. Okay, the island. So some of you, there are likely very few islands in this because a lot of islands don't go to conferences. Yep. So we're going to spend a tiny bit less time on this because I want to land a plane a little bit before we end, but this, I don't give a flying fuck. This is definitely the islands. I'm sorry for swearing. But it literally, when islands talk to you, that is the language that they use. They're like, I do not care. Don't talk to me about that stuff. Why are we still talking about this right to market thing? Can we all please stop, right? So the buttons and sliders for the island are, generally they do not watch the market, and generally speaking, they could care less what's trending. Their knowledge of self is usually high. I know there's at least one island in here, so I will go through this, but their care for others' opinions is off. Generally, they are really good at keeping anchored, and most of the time, islands are just going to do what they're going to do. They don't care, right? This is roughly 30 to 40% of authors, but again, not a lot of islands will be in this room. And then success or failure is on me. This is such a huge part of island behavior. They would rather fail by their own hand than succeed by someone else's. So an awful lot of islands are, and islands can still be innovative. That's why I put the innovation on here. Islands can still write different things. They can still want to trailblaze on accident. They usually don't do it on accident, because usually islands don't care if somebody else did it. They'll be like, oh, huh, well, good for them. Whereas trailblazers are livid that someone else did it first. So the desire for you could potentially be there with islands, but the big difference is, if someone doesn't follow you, are you going to lose your mind? Right? Thank you, islands. Roughly 30 to 40, yeah. We're still not totally finished with the research yet, and I do want to keep getting a bigger and bigger sample size, so, but we just keep validating. It just stays the same, no matter how many end. The story we tell ourselves is a lot of stagnancy, or I should be doing what someone else is doing, but again, most islands do not care. So mostly they're saying this stuff, or others are saying it to them as oh well, I guess we're going to do what we're going to do. And then there is long game money in writing the same thing for the same people for your entire career. So I just feel like we have to say that as well. We don't always have to change. And then again, you'll get these slides if you want them, but we do have to accept, if we're islands, that looking at the market is not our best work. And then networking is super important for islands, because they will need someone to help them sell those books that are islandy. Okay, so now, what do I do with this information? I have 1 minute, I apologize. But what do I do with this information? You have to align yourself with your archetype. It's so important when you have that organic sense of who you are and why you are the way you are, and you look at those buttons and you think, yes, this is me, then you have to stop listening to advice that falls outside of where you are. And you have to stop taking advice from people who are trying to shift you into being a different archetype than who you are, including those of you who are friends with islands and are trailblazers or drafters, and the islands are like, just stop caring. Don't do that. That's not for you. So you always have to ask, am I staying aligned with how my brain works and how I am going to have success in this industry? And I also have to say, only change the necessary things for right now. If all you do is find other people who are wired like you and start to form friendships with them, that will be enough. But for now, it's important for you to know that it is okay to say no to things that fall outside that. It is okay to say no to advice that doesn't work for you. But I just want to say thank you, everybody. One last, this is if you need to take a picture of this, I'm going to go outside so we don't muck up things in the room. So if anybody has questions, please ask. And please grab the slides off this link if you don't have them on hand. Thanks, everybody.